Today I'm going to show you how to set up my most basic scan that I use in the TD Ameritrade Thinkorswim platform. Not familiar with as familiar with other platforms and if you can set these scans up or not. Like I said, this is my most basic one that I use. Kind of the starting point that I will set this one up, and then I'll add or subtract to it in order to find potential trades and add to my watch list. This particular scan is based on my stacked EMA indicator. If you haven't set that up yet or want to know more about it, in the description below this video you can find a link to that and show you how to set that up. You'll get an idea of what it is as we build this scan, but if you just want to see how to set it up on your charts, you can go and take a look at that. So the first thing I typically do is where it says scan all, is I will come here and I will change this to weeklies, because most all the options trading I do are weekly options. Sometimes I do monthlies, but I typically start looking at the weeklies. We're going to go ahead and add a condition, or add a filter, sorry. We're going to do a stock filter, and I'm going to change the volume to a minimum of 100,000 shares. You can do more, but I typically like to see at least 100,000 shares traded if I'm going to be trading a security, just to make sure there's some liquidity there. And obviously I also look at the options when I actually get into the trades to check open interest and volume, just to make sure that I can get in and out of my trades. Probably most importantly, look at the spreads on the options, just to make sure that I don't lose too much on the spread side. Alright, the next thing we're going to do is start adding some studies. So what we want to do is do a let me try that again. I want to pull this study down and go down to custom. It brings up an ADX crossover. We want to edit that. And what we want to do is find a study, and we want to pull up the moving averages, and we want to do exponential, moving average exponential. And we want to start with our 10. Now we're looking for potential long entries. So I'm going to be looking for exponential moving averages that are stacked to the upside. So I'm going to start with the 10, and I need the 10 to be greater than, we're going to do another study, and another moving average, exponential. We want the 10 to be greater than the 20. We want to save this and click OK. Now you could continue to add the rest of them in that section, but sometimes I will remove certain of the conditions just as I look for good trades. So I'm going to do them separate. So now our first study filter is the volume greater than 100,000. Then we're looking for the 10 exponential moving average greater than the 20 exponential moving average. And again, we're looking for a long setup here. So now we're going to add another filter. It'd be another study filter. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to come down here and change this to custom. We're going to edit it, and we're going to do a study and pull up another moving average. Exponential. This time we're going to put the 20 in here, and we want it to be greater than, another study, we want it to be greater than the 30 EMA. I'll click Save and click OK. So now we want the 10 EMA greater than the 20 EMA. We want the 20 EMA greater than the 30 EMA. Okay, we've got two more to add in order to get this first one set up. I'm going to add another study. Come down here and set up a custom. Edit it. This time we're going to do a study. another moving average exponential. We're looking again for the 30, and we want it to be greater than, set the study, and we're going to do, there's two ways we could go here. I could set it up as an exponential on this side, but I'm not going to, because on my indicator I use a simple moving average for the 50 and the 200. So I'm going to go ahead and click simple moving average here. I'm going to set that up for the 50. Click OK. Okay, so now we've got the 30 EMA greater than the 50 EMA. Now we've got one more to add to get this very basic scan up and going that will show me if I have stacked moving averages that I look for. So we're going to do a study, custom, edit this one. I'm going to look at a study. This time we're going to do the simple moving average because we're using the 50 simple. And we want it to be greater than another study, simple moving average, and we want it to be greater than the 200. Alright, so here's what we've set up. We're looking in the weekly option chain. We need a volume of 100,000 on the stock. We need the 10 EMA greater than the 20 EMA. We need the 20 EMA greater than the 30 EMA. We need the 30 EMA greater than the 50 simple moving average. And we need the 50 moving average greater than the 200 simple moving average. So this is just my typical stacked EMAs that I use, my stacked moving averages that I use as one of my indicators. And this is the basis for a lot of my scans. What I would do is I would add different I would start by using this one and look and see what I found, if I found any good trades, and then I might add different things to it from there. Like maybe I would look for a close that was between the 10 and 20, and I'll show that on another video because today I just want to show you how to set up the basic scan that I start with. Now before I do anything else, I'm going to go ahead and save this. So let's click over here and we'll do Save Scan Query, and we're going to save it as the 10, 20, 30, 50, 200 average long. You can name it whatever you want to. That just helps me identify it very quickly when I'm looking at my scans, because I have quite a few scans that I use, and I'll teach a lot of them to you, but some have more value than others. So we're going to save this. And now we're going to do a scan and see what comes up. One thing that I would like to show you, one thing that I would like to show you, as I'm saying, is that I'm doing this all in a daily time frame. You could do this on other time periods, but I typically swing trade using the daily time frame. From time to time I might look at the weekly time frame, but typically all my scans are going to be on daily. And what you have here is a list of potential stocks that you could look at, that you could maybe put together some kind of trade on. And what I'm going to do is look at write these down and look at a few of these with you on the chart that has these indicators put on it. So let's switch over to the chart. Okay, I've got the chart pulled up now. I went ahead and pulled up the first one on the list, which was ACAD. And as you can see, again, if you need to know how to set this indicator up, there's a link in the descriptions below that show you how to do that. But as you can see, the 10 is greater than the 20 is greater than the 30 is greater than the 50, and the 50 is greater than the 200. Now, I would not enter a trade based just on this chart, but I'm not going to go through my other charts right now because, again, I want to talk to you about how to set the scan up. But really, this trade right here, I would feel comfortable going long right here based just on this chart, even though this is a large green candle. Ideally, I'd rather it be in this area when I went long, but I would have been a little bit nervous on these two candles. This candle typically would have been one I would have said, hey, maybe time to go long, but I don't like the wick on this one. So I may or may not would have taken the trade here, but I do think it's still a valid trade right here just based on this indicator alone. But again, I don't trade based on one indicator. I look at multiple indicators when I trade. So be very careful. If you're as we go through these, that you don't just take trades because based on this one chart it looks good. I have a multi-chart set of charts that I look at. In fact, how to set all those charts up again is below in the description, and you can look at each of those setups, and once you get your chart set up, you can look at this particular stock in each of those charts to see if this is a good entry. So let's go ahead and look at a couple of others to see how they look. All right, this is AG. Now, technically, the 10 is still over the 20 is still over the 30 is still over the 50. They're all over the 200. However, as you can tell, if you were looking to go long, this would probably not be one that I would go long in, because all of my EMAs are moving down, and it looks like my 10's about to cross my 20, and it's trading below the 30, which I don't like when it trades below. I'm sorry, below the 50, which I don't like when it trades below the 50. In fact, I don't like when it trades below the 30, which is the yellow line here. So I certainly don't like when it gets down in this 50 range. So even though this showed up on the scan as potential long, it really doesn't pass the eye test if you're thinking about going long on this trade. So I definitely would not be looking for a long here. All right, let's take a look at another one. Okay, here we've got stacked EMAs. The 10 is kind of leveled out a little bit. The 50, the 30, and 20 are still moving up. You can see after earnings, this stock really popped up, which these are certainly areas that I would not go long in. In fact, I might have shorted it right here, to be perfectly honest. That would have been a tempting short because of how far away it is from my EMAs. And certainly, again, right here would have been a good place to short, and this candle also. I would not, I would be tempted to take a look at this trade on the long side because you filled your gap here, but and it hit and bounced back up. You've got a candle here that didn't really finish toward the top of the wick, which I prefer to see, but it is between the 10 and 20, so there is a potential long here. You just based on this chart, which again I don't trade just on one chart. I would look at my other indicators to see if this is a good entry. But if I were going to try to look at a trade here, there is some potential, but I'd probably have my stop about right here if I was going long. I wouldn't give it too much room, certainly not below the 30. Maybe I give it to the 30, but certainly not before. And you can look back at previous price action to get an idea of how well it respects the EMAs. Even on the downside here, it's bouncing up into that 10 EMA and then it's coming back down until it finally starts to change direction. But then it's still bouncing the 10 EMA until it drops down and consolidates. Here it's bouncing the 10 EMA. So you would expect, looking at this, for an entry around the 10 EMA to be a good spot. It's a little concerning that it came down to the 20 here, but looking at this price action right here, I would be willing to chance a long if it checked out on the other charts. Let's look at another one. Alright, as you can tell, we've got all the moving averages stacked, which is what the scan was supposed to look for. You can see this chart would come back into the 20-30 range quite often, this stock. Right now it's been bouncing at this 10. I would not go long here. To me, because you've gotten too far away from this line, and my guess is if we look at some of my other indicators, this is going to be very over bought right now, and it's also hard to determine how high it could go. So this is a potential long stock, but not here. To me, it's a potential long when we get around again this 10 EMA, because you look at the price action on this 10 EMA. We want to be hugging this 10 EMA or maybe between the 10 and 20 before we go long. So the scan did identify a future trade for you. And what you would do is you'd add this to your list and you would watch it. And every day you would watch it and you'd see where it's trading. And if you can get it around this 10 EMA or between the 10 and 20, then that's a good trade. So these scans don't just tell you what might be a good trade today. They tell you what might be a good trade down the road. You just have to watch for the right entry. Let's look at one more. Again, the scan has identified that you've got stacked EMAs. Although the 50 just recently came over the 200, it hasn't been over very long, but it is, and it's also a very sharp move up. You see that how steep this line is. That tells you a couple of things. One is you don't want to buy here because it's too far away from your EMAs. It also tells you there's a good chance for a pullback of some sort because it cannot maintain this steep angle forever. So that's another thing you have to watch is how steep these lines are. In this area, you can see it came down, it traded back up. Right in here, you had quite a few potential short areas because it traded between the EMAs. Even in here, that would have been a good potential. This one had already gone too far away. Here's another short potential. Now, obviously, this would have been a short potential here. I probably actually, if I had been trading this, I would have shorted it right here on this candle. And as you can tell, at least temporarily, I would have been wrong, although it did break back down off the 200. But just goes to show you that you can't just look at a chart and look at one indicator and go, hey, this is the trade, I should take it, it's going to work, because they don't 100% of the time work. What you're trying to build is a system that gives you some consistency. If you can hit 60, 70, 75% of your trades and you don't let them get away from you, like if I, for instance, just as an example, if I had shorted right here, the only problem I have with shorting right here is realistically where my stop would have to be would be right here, because it's above this pivot high right here, and it's above the 50 simple. So if I did short here, I know that I'm going to be taking a risk from 47 to 49. And that's another thing you have to keep in mind. When you take a trade, you've got to determine if you can stomach the risk that's involved in it. Now, there are some ways to get around that a little bit, and I'll talk about that in some of my actual trades when I show you those. But you have to be aware of where your potential stop's going to be if you're going to get into a trade. Up in here, for instance, this right here, anywhere in here, there would have been a potential for a long. The only problem would have been, of course, you're still trading below the 200 EMA on your indicators, which I don't like. But if you were just looking at the stock and ignoring that 200 EMA, you could have a potential long here as it came back into between the 10 and 20 EMA. But again, where's your stop going to be? If I went long, probably let's say right here on this candle, then my stop would have probably been at this 30 EMA, if not the 50. So it may not have been worth the risk. And that's something you got to keep in mind when you're looking at these trades, is just because it shows up on the scan doesn't always mean it's a good trade. But anyway, that is how you set up my basic, most simple scan that I start with. I do use some other things that I add to it later, and I'll show you those in other videos where I add another component to them, or another filter where I'm actually looking for a stacked up like this, but I'm trying to identify this close right here as an entry point. And that's very easy to add to this particular trade. You can turn this into a short scan simply by going back and modifying all of the filters from greater than to less than. And then all of a sudden you're going to be looking for this trade here where all your EMAs are stacked down, and it would show up here. So it's a very simple, very basic scan that I start with, and a lot of the securities and stocks you see me trading, I have found using these types of scans. Please subscribe to the channel. Please like this video if you liked it, and let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.